Mossad is known for some of the most audacious spy missions ever, going deep undercover into enemy territory, catching seemingly untouchable terror masterminds, and duping militant groups into buying rigged electronics through a ruse so elaborate no one suspects a thing, until they explode without warning. Mossad waits until their target feels safe, and then reminds them that they aren't.
We are a global production company. We write the screenplay, we're the directors, we're the producers, we're the main actors, the world is our stage.
But not all of their productions have gone off perfectly, a sign of just how dangerous and complex their operations can be. So how has Mossad managed to take down some of its most elusive targets, and what happened when things went wrong? Successful spies are masters of patience. Their work can take months or even years, and then, when their target least expects it, Mossad sends a little message. There is no escape. No one is out of reach. Not even a ghost. Even when he was alive, Mughniyeh was a ghost, and not the friendly kind. He'd always been extreme. As a teenager in Beirut, he controlled a savage gang that prowled the streets enforcing Islamic law, mostly by beating up drug suppliers and female escorts. But he had bigger ambitions. But by the time he turned 21, he was second in command of a new shadowy terror organization, Hezbollah. Within months of assuming the position, he masterminded 2 blasts that claimed hundreds of lives.
191 Marines dead in the explosion at their headquarters at the Beirut airport.
He oversaw some of the most barbaric abductions the West had ever seen, and his reach extended well beyond his home turf. Mughniyeh ruthlessly targeted Israelis and Jews around the world. Israel had to eliminate him. But all the Israelis had to identify him was one washed-out photo. For over 20 years, no spy agency could catch him, not even Mossad, which employed some creative strategies to lure him out of hiding. Like assassinating his brother, another Hezbollah operative. Mossad waited for Mughniyeh at the funeral, but Mughniyeh was too crafty to show up. His brother was put in the ground without him, and Mossad seemed to be out of luck. He was a ghost, a puff of smoke that no one could pin down, until Hezbollah made a mistake. In 2004, Israel took out Ghaleb, a senior Hezbollah commander. In a touching show of sentimentality, Hezbollah's propaganda department memorialized him in a short film. Bad move, because Mossad got their hands on the video, analyzing every frame for new information. They didn't expect to spot a ghost on camera. But there he was, standing next to Hezbollah's leader, Mughniyeh, in the flesh. It was the first sighting of Mughniyeh in decades. Now Israel knew what he looked like, and they knew that if he was near Nasrallah, he was probably somewhere in Lebanon. But where? And how would they get to him? As they pondered ways to reach Mughniyeh, Mossad pulled off a huge coup. They hacked into an Iranian government system that kept files on its allies and proxies, including Mughniyeh. And that's how Mossad found out that since 2006, Mughniyeh had been living in Damascus under an assumed name. It was the breakthrough they'd been waiting for, but it was also a problem. Because Syria was a target country, an enemy state where undercover operations are especially dangerous. Organizing an assassination attempt would require lots of reconnaissance trips into Syria. But Syrian security was vigilant and sophisticated, and everyone knew what they'd do to a captured Israeli spy. It was too risky for Israeli agents to make the trips into Damascus. So Mossad did something highly unusual. They asked the Americans for help. But the CIA has a strict policy of not picking fights with neutral countries. And at the time, Syria and the US had diplomatic relations. They couldn't just carry out an assassination on Syrian soil willy-nilly. Or could they? Turns out, they could. The US had their own reasons for wanting Mughniyeh gone, including the fact that he'd been sending men into Iraq to carry out strikes against American troops. So the CIA agreed to help under 2 conditions. 1, the Israelis could target Mughniyeh and only Mughniyeh. That meant that if anyone else was in the vicinity, the whole operation was off. And 2, US agents would help find Mughniyeh, but Mossad would be the ones to take him out. The Israelis agreed. It was time for an exorcism. As American agents tailed Mughniyeh, they found the pious family man had a weakness. Syrian security services had supplied him with 3 women to be his special friends. He would drive out to see them on his own, a surprising lapse in security for someone who was otherwise totally obsessed with staying out of danger. Because Mughniyeh was no dummy. He knew he was a target, and he and his bodyguards were careful to check often for detonators inside and under his car. But for whatever reason, they didn't think to check the case holding the spare tire in the back of his slick silver SUV. Bingo. This was it. If Mossad could get some kind of blast material into the tire cover, Mughniyeh was going down. For months, Mughniyeh had a constant tail, watching and waiting for the right moment when his car was unattended. One night, while Mughniyeh was getting cozy with one of his lady friends, Mossad agents swooped in. They exchanged his tire cover for a new one, which had a special device that would eliminate Mughniyeh without causing any other casualties. The weapon was ready. Now they just needed everything else to fall into place. For weeks, Mossad operatives waited on edge. They almost detonated the charge 32 times, stopping at the last moment when Mughniyeh got into his car too quickly or when he got too close to another person. They didn't forget their agreement with the CIA. The target was Mughniyeh, and only Mughniyeh. The 33rd time was the charm. On a chilly February evening, Mughniyeh left a meeting with Syrian intelligence and other Hezbollah officers. Alone. This was it. As he drew closer to his car, the agents detonated. After 30 years, they'd gotten the ghost. This wasn't Israel's first time executing a daring mission in enemy territory. They'd done it before, and they would do it again. But the results wouldn't always be so perfect. Dubai is the so-called playground of the rich in the Middle East. It's home to incredible skyscrapers, improbable indoor ski hills, and the pristine turquoise waters of the Persian Gulf. It's also where some of the most notorious militants like to do business. Mahmoud al-Mabhouh was one of these militants. Israel had wanted him for 2 decades, ever since the 80s, when he and an accomplice had kidnapped 2 Israeli soldiers and taken their lives. Later, al-Mabhouh bragged that his only regret was that he hadn't pulled the trigger himself. 20 years later, al-Mabhouh was coordinating arms shipments for Hamas, running the network that moved Iranian weapons into the Gaza Strip, weapons that Hamas used to attack Israelis. It was time for Israel to get rid of him. The question was where and how. Al-Mabhouh spent a lot of his time in countries like Syria, China, Iran, and Sudan. Not exactly Israel's buddies. But al-Mabhouh was a frequent flyer to another destination, Dubai. In 2009, the Emirati government was none too friendly to Israel. Dubai was risky, but it was the best of bad options. Tons of foreigners passed through the emirate, which meant Mossad operatives could easily pose as tourists. And Dubai's security wasn't as sophisticated as Iran's or Syria's. The Israelis figured that any investigation wouldn't get very far. Mistake number 1. In 2009, Mossad deployed a team to spy on al-Mabhouh and learn his habits. They entered the UAE undercover using false identities and foreign passports. Passports that in some cases belonged to real people who had no idea that Mossad had borrowed their documents. A few months later, they broke out those same foreign passports and returned to Dubai, this time to eliminate al-Mabhouh by poison. The mission was a failure. All the poison ended up doing was making al-Mabhouh feel a little unwell. The good news was that he never realized it was the Israelis who were the source of his illness. The bad news was that he was still at large, and Mossad was determined that next time they tried to eliminate him, nothing could go wrong. So in January 2010, Israel's hit squad landed in Dubai for the second time, using the same foreign names and passports as before. Mistake number 2. The hit squad wasn't sure where al-Mabhouh would be staying, so they broke up into small teams and checked into different hotels. Some paid in cash, but other agents paid with debit cards issued by one specific company, a company that was run by an Israeli. Mistake number 3. The team was scattered around the city, but they had to communicate with each other in real time, so they used cell phones. But cell phones are very easy to track, so they didn't call each other directly. Instead, the agents called a central switchboard in Austria, which connected them automatically to each other. Mistake number 4. Now, I think everybody knows that part of being a successful spy is switching up your look. New wigs, different hats, glasses, even a costume or two. The hit squad had this technique down pat. They'd come prepared with disguises. Some posed as tennis players, one guy even entered a bathroom bald as a cue ball and left it with a head of luxurious hair. But even if they could evade the attention of other people, there were silent eyes watching them all the time. Dubai's hotels were absolutely chock full of security cameras. Cameras that saw and recorded everything. Mistake number 5. Just 6 hours after al-Mabhouh landed in Dubai, the hit squad broke into his hotel room. It took 20 minutes to accomplish their mission. After locking the room from the inside, the hit squad hightailed it out of the hotel and onto flights. Al-Mabhouh lay in bed after what looked like a heart attack. At first, the hotel security officers who found him thought they'd stumbled on a random tourist who had the misfortune to croak on vacation. The authorities didn't know it was Hamas's weapons guy. They only knew al-Mabhouh by the false name he'd traveled under. His body went to the morgue, and nobody thought about it. Until Hamas started to get suspicious. When al-Mabhouh stopped answering their calls, they knew something was off. One of their agents searched police stations and morgues until he found al-Mabhouh. And now the Dubai authorities were in for a nasty surprise. That random tourist? Not actually a tourist. And that heart attack wasn't a heart attack at all, but the work of Mossad. Dubai's security services were furious at Hamas for using Dubai as a base for illegal activity, and at Mossad, which had just assassinated somebody in their country. They scoured airline passenger lists, looking for anyone who had traveled to Dubai around the same time as al-Mabhouh. A series of foreign names kept appearing and reappearing. Authorities cross-checked those names against hotel guest lists, and those silent eyes, Dubai's huge network of security cameras, gave them another piece of the puzzle: the faces of the agents. With the names of the agents in hand, investigators looked at the data. A lot of data. Data like debit cards that were traced back to a company headed by an Israeli, phone calls that were all mysteriously routed to the same switchboard in Austria. Information that made it glaringly obvious that a group of people seemingly scattered around Dubai had actually acted in unison. Dubai's lead investigator was able to cobble together security footage to retrace the steps of the hit squad, almost to the minute. This grainy, silent movie wasn't going to win any Oscars, but the evidence was irrefutable. And Dubai wasn't the only angry government.
France condemns this assassination. Murder is no way to carry out international relations.
The Dubai passports incident also constitutes a clear and direct breach of confidential undertakings between Australia and Israel dating back some years.
Whether Mossad had forged the passports or used real ones, to the countries whose passports had been used, the diplomatic fallout was intense. On paper, the mission was a success. They'd eliminated al-Mabhouh, temporarily interrupting Hamas's flow of weapons. But the operation was a bust. A number of agents had been exposed, and tradecraft secrets revealed, which weren't even that sophisticated to begin with. It was an embarrassing episode, but a useful one, because Israel learned a lot about what not to do. And though it took over a decade, they eventually put those lessons to good use. Here's the story of how a broken air conditioner almost foiled Israel's operation to get rid of a top October 7th mastermind. Ismail Haniyeh had been involved with Hamas since he graduated from university. By the time the terror group wrested control of the Gaza Strip in a bloody coup, he was in charge. For a decade, he ruled Hamas with an iron fist. But by 2017, he'd traded the Gaza Strip for Qatar, one of the richest countries in the Middle East. As millions of Gazans struggled to put food on the table, Haniyeh lived in the lap of luxury with a net worth of $4 billion. A true man of the people, right? As for why Haniyeh enjoyed the good life in Qatar, well, it's complicated. Qatar had hosted Hamas's leadership since 2012 at the request of the United States, which wanted an easier way to talk to the terror group. Israel agreed to respect this arrangement, and that meant attacking any Hamas operatives on Qatari soil was absolutely out of the question. And Israel was not about to repeat the Dubai debacle and risk alienating its most important ally, the United States. If they were going to get Haniyeh, they'd have to wait for him to leave Qatar. Problem was, Haniyeh spent most of his time in Turkey, Russia, and the Islamic Republic of Iran, highly dangerous countries for Israeli operatives. And when he was visiting Iran, Haniyeh wasn't exactly couch surfing. He stayed in one of Tehran's most heavily guarded hotels, the guest house of the Islamic Republic's notorious IRGC. The IRGC is powerful, dangerous, and sophisticated, but even they weren't immune to Israel's tradecraft. In May 2024, an unexpected event sparked one of Mossad's most ambitious assassinations. On a cool spring day, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi's helicopter unexpectedly crashed into a remote mountainside. No one in Israel, or most of Iran, was shedding any tears over Raisi. He was a monster, responsible for executing several thousand political prisoners in Iran. But right away, Israel realized that they had a golden opportunity. The helicopter crash meant Iran would hold a state funeral, and shortly thereafter, the inauguration of a new president. And as a key figure in Iran's terror proxy network, Ismail Haniyeh would undoubtedly attend both events, which left Israel just weeks to plan the assassination that would finally take Haniyeh out. So someone working for the Israelis smuggled a device into the IRGC guest house, carefully positioned in Haniyeh's room. Some news reports say the device was placed soon after Raisi's crash, while others claim it was placed a couple months later, just moments before the detonation. We still don't know who, or how, or when, but we do know this. As the inauguration festivities wound down and Haniyeh made his way back to his room, a team of agents was waiting. And then, the AC broke down. July in the Middle East is hot. Even bad guys need to stay cool. So when Haniyeh left to get his air conditioner fixed, the team feared he was switching rooms. A twist of fate which would have led to a very different ending to this story. But after a while, Haniyeh came back. He didn't have long to enjoy the room, because in the early hours of July 31st, 2024, the Israeli agents hit the button. And one of the men who had masterminded the 10/7 attacks, one of the men responsible for the loss of tens of thousands of lives, Israeli and Palestinian, was finally gone. But the military conflict was far from over. Since that horrific day in October, Israel had been fighting on multiple fronts. At first they'd focused on Hamas, but as Hezbollah rockets rained down on Israel's northern communities, driving 60,000 Israelis from their homes, it was clear that the situation couldn't continue. It was time to take down Hezbollah. Back in 2014, Taylor Swift had just dropped her hit single Shake It Off. Russia was hosting the Winter Olympics, and Israel, usually known for its high tech, was in the business of making walkie-talkies for a very special customer. That customer was Hezbollah, who were in the market for walkie-talkies for their fighters. They're the perfect method of communication on a battlefield, instant and secure. So Israel seized on the opportunity. Their plan was simple: copy a popular Japanese design Hezbollah liked, replace some of the battery components with tiny blast devices, and convince Hezbollah to buy them. Easy peasy. Using a complex network of shell companies, Israel sold 16,000 walkie-talkies to Hezbollah operatives. And then, for 10 years, they sat back and waited. Like KGB sleeper spies from the Cold War, the walkie-talkies seemed innocent. In reality, they were deadly weapons, ready to activate at a moment's notice. Fast forward a few years, a female Mossad agent had a bright idea. Why not do the same with pagers? Rig some unassuming-looking pagers and voila! You have a handheld, remote-controlled, exploding device. Pagers are the dinosaurs of communication devices. For the most part, they're a museum piece.
That belongs in a museum!
But for a terror group like Hezbollah, pagers had a lot of appeal. Pagers don't have much function other than receiving a message, but their limited utility also means that they can't be electronically hacked. Perfect for a group that doesn't want to be tracked. Initially, Mossad said, nah, not enough people in Hezbollah were using pagers to warrant the effort it would take to make and distribute them. But over time, Hezbollah's higher-ups were getting antsy about using cell phones, which could be hacked and tracked. It was too big a risk, so Israel jumped in. They even got a team to flood Arabic-language social media with fake news about Israel's amazing ability to hack cell phones, trying to fool Hezbollah into looking for more secure alternatives, like pagers. Mossad knew that Hezbollah would be suspicious of new technology companies trying to sell them products, so Israel had to work within their existing supplier system. But the suppliers couldn't know either. Everything had to seem above board, which meant Mossad had to go deep. Hezbollah got its devices from a Taiwanese technology company. So Israel set up a shell company based in Budapest, which bought a licensing agreement from Gold Apollo to manufacture a new line of beepers. This new product line was bigger, more rugged, more durable, and it came with a little surprise embedded in the battery. Israeli engineers spent months testing and tweaking the pagers, which were designed to maim rather than take a life. The blast radius was tiny. Only the person carrying the beeper would be injured. Mossad left nothing to chance. They tested which ringtones would be most compelling and how long it would take for someone to check their beeper after being paged. To convince Hezbollah that the pagers were a worthwhile investment, Israel tapped again into the power of social media, creating slick ads that played on YouTube. Even legitimate customers were interested, but the Israelis dissuaded them by quoting absurdly high prices. Of course, these customers had no idea that they were really talking to Mossad. Meanwhile, the sales team made Hezbollah an offer they couldn't refuse. The first batch of beepers were free, and they'd offer a discount if they bought in bulk. Hezbollah fell for it hook, line, and sinker. By the fall of 2023, they'd handed out thousands of pagers to their operatives. But Israel was on borrowed time. One of Hezbollah's top technicians was starting to get suspicious that the walkie-talkies Hezbollah had bought 10 years earlier might actually be incendiary devices. He was asking one too many questions, so Israel shut him down permanently with an airstrike. But the clock was ticking. Israel's military intelligence learned that Hezbollah had asked Iran to examine the pagers, worried that they might contain explosives. It was time to act. 5 days later, in the middle of the afternoon, an encrypted message went out to the rigged pagers, triggering the hidden detonators. Seconds later, a wave of explosions sounded all across Lebanon. The country was in shock, but Israel wasn't done yet. A few days later, they activated the walkie-talkies. 10 years of waiting were over. Thousands of Hezbollah's fighters were taken out of action. Their communications network was shattered. Their leaders were scrambling. And Israel capitalized on the chaos to finally assassinate Hezbollah's elusive leader, Hassan Nasrallah. It was the stuff of spy thrillers, so unlikely it seems impossible. But that is Mossad's MO. They have to remain adaptable, they have to think outside the box, they have to strike when they're least expected. Not every mission succeeds, but when they do, they remind Israel's enemies that the Jewish people fight back, and that Mossad is always watching, working overtime to protect their tiny nation.